Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
17. That's a wrap. Henry Riccotto's father looked at his men lying beaten senseless in the street. He did not know what was going on, but he was going to find out. "My name is Sebastian Riccotto," he said coldly to James. "Are you the one who hit my son?" He looked at James with eyes as sharp as blades. He had the bearing of a tough man who was used to people obeying him. The muzzle of the gun was locked on James's forehead. It seemed Sebastian would shoot without hesitation if James gave him a wrong answer. James remained oddly serene. "Yes, it was me," was all that he said. He crossed his arms in front of his chest defiantly. The four women in the hotel were about to faint with fright. The eyes of the bystanders and tourists lit up with excitement when they saw James's reaction. What a movie! They looked around trying to find the cameras hidden in the dark. Even the guy from South Africa who had taken a photo with him earlier gave him a thumbs up. His expression one of undisguised hero worship. James was speechless by the carelessness of these people. Didn't they realize this was a real criminal and that was a real gun? But Sebastian Riccotto hesitated. He couldn't help but have grudging respect for this apparently fearless individual in front of him. "I see that you have guts," he said. "I will spare your life, but apologize to my son. Then today's matter will be forgotten." Sebastian had killed people before, and one more wouldn't make a difference. But his rough code of honor forced him to acknowledge this stranger's courage. But James did not apologize. Instead, his expression turned hard. "I think you'd better put away the pistol," he said. "It offends me when people wave guns in my face." Sebastian was just as amazed as everyone else at this disrespectful response, but he didn't show it. Instead, he just shrugged. "Suit yourself, fool," he said. His finger began to depress the trigger. Suddenly, James was gone. Just as suddenly, he materialized like a ghost beside the gangster and grabbed the hand holding the pistol. The next second, everyone heard the clear sound of bones breaking. The handgun magically appeared in James's hand. He crumpled it into pieces and scattered the parts in the street. "My hand!" Sebastian screamed. "My hand is broken!" He squatted on the ground and wailed in pain. The crowd was loving it. They still thought that James and Sebastian were acting. Henry Riccotto felt as if the sky had collapsed on him. He and his father had always been the top dogs on Blaha Island. They had never been humiliated like this before. But whoever this guy was, he was too strong to defeat. James walked up to Sebastian. He squatted next to him and said, "As I was saying, I don't like being held at gunpoint. It's rude." Sebastian's face had turned green from the pain. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. For the first time in decades, he felt afraid. The same was true of Henry. The gangster's son was about to pee his pants. The crowd was completely overwhelmed by the realistic drama unfolding before them. Their witnessing of all of this only added to the Riccotto's humiliation. James looked up at Henry. "Anything else from you?" He squirmed. No, he answered timidly. "Then get lost," James growled. Henry helped his father up. He paid no attention to the injured minion scattered nearby. Just as he got the older man into the Mercedes, James pointed at him. "Get over here," he ordered. Henry did not dare to disobey. He hustled over. "I own this hotel now," James said. "If you ever show your face here again trying to collect protection fees, I will break your head open and dump your brains into the gutter." The young gangster couldn't find the words to respond. What if he somehow offended this guy? He left in a panic with his tattered crew. As they disappeared around the corner, the surrounding onlookers went crazy and burst into rapturous applause for this wonderful performance. James didn't want to spoil their fun. He waved with both hands, expressing his gratitude to the crowd. Then he turned around and shouted to the women in the hotel doorway. "All right, director, That's a wrap for today. Krista immediately understood what he was up to. She walked out the door of the hotel and said loudly, "Cut! All right, everyone, let's pack up." The murmuring crowd quickly dispersed into the night. Just as James and the others were about to head back into the lobby, a voice came from behind. "Hello, are you Mr. James Tucker?" Episode 118, Mamoud. James turned around and saw a dignified Arabic man in his 50s. The man looked at him kindly. "Yes, I'm James Tucker," he said. "And you are?" But he had already guessed who the older man was. Just as he asked the question, Kaya Kova walked up to them and said respectfully, "Mr. Fasim, thank goodness you're here." The man nodded at Kaya, then walked directly to James and greeted him warmly. "Hello, I am Mamoud Fasim, the manager of your hotel. Welcome, sir." Vanessa, Katie, and Krista heard this but were still surprised. Although James had already said he owned the hotel, it didn't seem real until the manager here confirmed it. James reached out and shook hands with Mamoud. The man held James's hand as if he were unwilling to let go. "Mr. Tucker," he said, "I've been looking forward to meeting you ever since you bought this hotel. I wasn't expecting your arrival to be so late in the evening, or I would have been here myself to greet you." James assumed the role of a gracious new boss. "Thank you for your hard work," he said kindly. The chemistry between the two of them was immediate. They were like old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. Mamoud extended his arm and said, "Sir, ladies, this way, please." They walked into the lobby together. Mamoud looked at Kaya and asked respectfully, "Would you mind making our guests some tea?" "Thank you, but no need," James said. "We need to arrange for a place to stay first. My friends and I are tired and we need a good rest." Mamoud nodded to James, then turned to Kaya and said, "Please arrange for them to stay in the presidential suite." Kaya hesitated. Although she knew James was the new owner of the hotel, all the rooms were occupied, including their premier suite. Feeling in a bit of a dilemma, she explained the situation. Not wanting to make things difficult for Kaya, James interjected before Mamoud could speak. "It's okay," he said. "You must know another suitable place where we can spend the night. It's late. You can't let Miss Koza chase the guests out now, right?" Mamoud agreed. "Yes, you are right. It would be all over social media before sunrise. It wouldn't be good for business." Kaya was grateful. This new boss obviously was considerate to both his guests and his employees. Mamoud thought for a moment. "Mr. Tucker, my house is nearby. Although the living conditions are not as good as here at the hotel, it is convenient and comfortable. If you don't mind, why don't you come to my home for the night?" James smiled gratefully. "Okay, that's decided." Mamoud was part of the upper class on Blaha Island. His 3-story house with its exquisite Islamic stylings had plenty of room for all of them. No one else in the neighborhood lived in such a big home. This made James a little curious. But he didn't stand on ceremony and asked his host to arrange rooms for Krista, Katie, and Vanessa. After that, he and Mamoud sat in the living room and chatted over glasses of mint tea. James was enjoying his manager's company, but secretly he did not want to chat. He wanted to know more about the next check-in with the system. But it was too late to go back to the Macedero, so he settled into their conversation. "Have you always been manager of the hotel?" he asked. "Not exactly," Mamoud replied. "Before you bought the hotel, I was the owner. I created it myself." That explained the size of his house. "I imagine you were successful. Why did you sell?" James asked. His words seemed to touch Mamoud's sore spot. He didn't answer the question directly. Instead, he sighed and said, "Before you bought my hotel, my family and I were living a good life. My 3 children worked at the Macedero through high school and then went to the capital, Antananarivo, to attend university. They all settled down there and have good jobs. But just 6 months ago, my wife fell ill. In order to treat her, I spent almost all of my savings, and she still hasn't left the hospital bed. Mamoud stopped talking. The subject obviously made him uncomfortable. "Oh, I'm very sorry," James said. "Mr. Fasim, please forgive me." Mamoud waved his hand. "It's okay," he said. A smile appeared on his face, but it was filled with quiet sadness. After a brief pause to collect himself, he continued. "2 months ago, I was at my wit's end. But then I happened to bump into your subordinate who was looking to buy a hotel on Blaha Island. I sold you the business I've been running for my entire adult life, but I had no choice. I couldn't function as a hotel owner while caring for my wife." He looked at James with gratitude. "Your purchaser felt that I was familiar with the place and had a deep affection for it, so he kindly hired me to stay on as manager." As their conversation continued, James was able to fill in some missing pieces about the system. It had purchased the Masodero Hotel 2 months ago. That being the case, it must have known he would escape from the island soon after. It seemed that the system would not let him die easily, otherwise it would lose its host. Although there was still much to learn, James now felt more confident about this unbelievable addition to his life. Early the next morning, James was woken by the sound of birds chirping outside his window. He walked out the door and saw that the house was surrounded by all sorts of trees, the home for the many birds flying from branch to branch. It all made for a pleasant, tranquil setting. Because they were near the sea, the air was especially fresh. James strolled among the trees. The pure air and morning songs of the birds made him feel the warmth of Madagascar in an instant. The entire country was considered a paradise for animals and plants, including many James had never seen before. It seemed that Madagascar was indeed worthy of its reputation. James! It was the women. They had woken up early too. They came to his side and together they enjoyed this wonderful morning on Blaha Island. Last night they had gotten the most peaceful and comfortable sleep in months. Each one of them looked radiant. James was so happy he felt as if he were floating on air. These 3 women were like the birds in the trees. They were beautiful fairies blessing his life. Mamoud came outside and beckoned them to a back patio. There he served a hot breakfast and brought out 4 phones. According to James's instruction last night, the phones had already been installed with SIM cards. They could dial international calls directly. "Please put the cost for the phones on the hotel's account," James said to Mamoud. The older man smiled and said, "There is no need. Accept these as my gift to you." James smiled and didn't say anything. He gave each of the ladies a phone and said, "All of you, contact your families. They haven't heard from you in months." He had an idea. Episode 119, Checking In. Vanessa, Katie, and Krista each took a phone. James picked up the 4th one and walked out into the yard. He found a quiet place in the forest and dialed Scott Parker. Although his old phone was long gone, he still remembered his good friend's number. He made the deliberate decision not to call his parents first. He wanted to ask Scott how they were getting along in New York before he spoke with them. He was also afraid he might be overcome with emotion when he heard their voices, so Scott would serve as his warm-up call. After a few rings, the call connected. "This is Scott Parker. Who is this?" Although James tried his best to control his emotions, he still got choked up when he heard his friend's familiar voice. "It's me, James," he said. "James? Oh my God, you finally called. I've been trying to reach you for months. Teresa and I have been so worried about you. How are you? Where are you?" It was as if he had gone mad. He asked so many questions in one breath that James did not know where to start. At the first opportunity, he broke into his friend's excited questioning. "Don't exaggerate, man. I've only been gone for 2 months." But Scott wasn't about to relent. "What do you mean? There was no news at all. You just went missing. I've been going crazy. I was this close to filing a missing person case with the NYPD. Now feeling a little guilty, James changed the topic. Never mind all that, he said. How are my parents? Well, Scott said. Naturally, they were worried sick about you. They said they wanted to leave New York, and I couldn't persuade them otherwise. About 2 weeks ago, an Andy Fremont from your hometown drove up from Virginia and took your folks back there. When Scott sensed James's concern, he tried to soften the blow. Don't worry, they were fine when they went back, all things considered. They were in good health, but hurry up and contact them. They call me almost every day for any news of you. After a few more minutes listening to Scott say how worried he was, James tactfully ended the call. The more he thought about it, the better he felt about his parents being back in their hometown. He took a breath and dialed their number. Hello? It was his father. James did his best to keep his voice calm. Dad, it's me. James? Yeah, Dad. How are you and Mom? Henry Tucker ignored the question. You ungrateful jerk, he said. You remember that you even have a father? We haven't heard from you for so long. Did you want to kill us? James couldn't help but smile in the face of his father's scolding. He knew the man was not good at expressing himself. Dad, I was out of the country and things got a little busy. I had a lot of stuff to do, so I forgot. You had too many things to do and you forgot. How could you just abandon your mother and me like that? James figured that now was the right time to admit his mistake. I know. I was wrong. I promise it will never happen again. At this point, his mother, Marilyn, got on the other line. James, it's Mom. Is it really you? How are you? Where have you been? Her gentle voice made him feel warm inside. Hi, Mom, I'm fine. I'm on Blaha Island off Madagascar right now. They talked for almost an hour, James doing his best to relieve their concerns. He left out all the details about pirates and deserted islands and gun-toting gangsters. After hanging up the phone, James called Mitchell Haynes, his personal property manager. Like the others, Mitch was very excited to hear from him. He provided a complete rundown of his work since James had been away. This guy was very good at handling things. Not only did he rent out the rest of the floors at the Global Financial Center, he also signed leases for the remaining 8 apartments in the Lux Villa district. He also reported how he'd allocated the $15 million as instructed to begin renovating the 60th floor of the Global Financial Center building into James's private office. The drawings were complete and the workers had already started. Everything was going smoothly. Subtracting that expense, James still had $200 million in his bank account. Mitchell had done a great job and James was delighted, so he decided to reward him $5 million on the spot as a performance bonus. He then arranged for Mitch to get his original SIM card for his phone and send it to the Masodero Hotel by express international delivery. James's next call was to Stephen Leland at East Ocean Maritime. The yacht needed to be repaired, then restocked with fuel, fresh water, and food. As always, Stephen did not disappoint. He did some quick checking and said that East Ocean Maritime had a repair facility on Madagascar in the coastal town of Vadomandri. As long as he could get the yacht there, it would be taken care of. Finally, James asked Stephen to help him replace their 4 missing passports with all the necessary visas and mail them over. Although East Ocean Maritime specialized in that sort of service, Stephen said it would take at least 5 to 6 days to get it done. Including the time needed for delivery, James estimated that he and the ladies would be staying on Blaha Island for at least 10 days. He felt much better after touching base with everyone he needed to, but there was one thing still nagging him. When they arrived at the Masodero Hotel last night, the check-in had not activated. After breakfast, Mamoud took James and the women to the hotel. From that day onward, they would be staying in the presidential suite. The other guests had checked out, and Mamoud had arranged everything. Mamoud's residence was not far from the Masodero, so the 5 of them walked. It was a bright and sunny day. The morning air was especially fresh, and the tropical plants were all in bloom. They could see Madagascar's famous lemurs scampering in the trees next to the road. As the group approached the entrance of the hotel, they stopped in their tracks. Although it was early in the morning, the sidewalk out front was already packed with people. They were holding things in their hands, local crafts, bottles of liquor, even small bundles of cash. Kaya Koza was standing at the front door trying to explain loudly that the boss was not there. James quickly walked up and said to the crowd, "I am James Tucker. I am the owner of this hotel." As soon as he finished his sentence, someone shouted, "There he is! It's him!" The mob rushed over and surrounded him. They offered the items in their hands to him with smiles on their faces. Apparently, they were expressing their gratitude for something, but these were all locals. They spoke in a confusing mix of the local languages, Malagasy and French. James could not understand a single word they were saying.